Ladies and gentlemen, now hosting the RizzoCast, put your hands together for Steven Risotto!
What is happening, everybody, and welcome. This is a milestone episode for us, episode number 69 of RizzoCast. And we are joined today by none other than someone who covers the Twins for Access Twins. It is Brandon Warne joining the show. Brandon, what's going on? How you doing?
It's nice to be here. Emphasis on nice, but everything's great. It's a beautiful summer day. We're having pretty good weather in Minneapolis, and I'm excited to be on the show.
Yeah, super excited to have you on, and we're going to get into a few things. And when I was coming up with, as there's a drive in the deep left field by Castellanos, and that will be a home run. In case you guys don't know, Brandon is actually his claim to fame in the social media world is that he came up with kind of a very it went viral. It was a clip that went viral. Brandon, do you kind of want to explain what it was?
Yeah, so I was actually just kind of up messing around on MLB The Show. In fact, it was before I discovered how awesome Diamond Dynasty is. So we'll put that feature over because holy smokes, is that good. But I was messing around and I was actually on Twitter talking to Max Wildstein, who's one of the better MLB The Show players that I know anyway. And I said, dude, you should make a video of the Castellanos Tom Brenneman thing. And he didn't do it. And so I was like, oh, what the heck? I'm going to try to do it. So I literally set up in my office like 2 12-packs of soda, propped my phone up to the screen and recreated the moment. And then I dubbed the audio over it. And I just kind of synchronized it up. And the rest is history. And almost 2 million views later, here we are.
How many tries did that take? Because I feel like that took some, and was it the same count too? So how many tries did that take for you to get it?
Actually, so it was kind of funny. I'm going to admit to this. I just started the game with Greg Holland on the mound and Nick Castellanos batting. Unfortunately, the angle that I recorded at, and this wasn't intentional, did not have the score on the screen. So you can go back and look and see that. It literally took me 10 minutes to do the whole thing, though. I think, if it would have taken hours, it would not have been worth it. But I think it was the 4th time through I synced everything up and managed to hit a home run because I was using 2 controllers. That was the other hard part, was throwing first I threw the slider off the plate and I threw a fastball right down the middle. But Holland's reaction was perfect. The length of the clip as he's rounding the base was perfect. It came out way better than I could have ever imagined. And again, 10 minutes of my life that while I'll never get it back, I'm still pretty happy I did.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely something that I would do for sure. So Brandon, we just had the AllStar Game, and I know a lot of people look forward to kind of AllStar Week and the festivities that happen, and a lot of people like seeing their favorite players on the field being represented, and the red carpet, and of course the home run derby and the game itself. What were kind of some impressions that you saw from this week or the past few days?
I mean, it brought some positivity to Colorado, which hasn't had much for baseball stuff lately, and Shohei Ohtani obviously was kind of the big story, and I'm happy to see him get the notoriety he deserves after how much we've seen Mike Trout still kind of blend into the surroundings. Now, again, it probably helps that Trout is hurt, that he's getting some more notoriety, but again, it is what it is. Otherwise, too, I've grown up watching the All-Star Game, and so it appealed to me more as a younger person when I couldn't just flip a dial and watch the Los Angeles Dodgers play on any given night. So it'd be cool to see like Mike Piazza in the 1996 All-Star Game or whatever. But I still kind of, the purist in me likes to see all these different guys mingling. And part of it too is you see these superstars. You see the Vladimir Guerrero Jr.'s coming up and Fernando Tatis Jr. But then you see the kind of one-off guys who might just be having a good half. Omar Narvaez, Eduardo Escobar, who's a personal favorite of mine. I just love that mixing of guys who are big time stars and guys who are having really good first halves. And again, too, I'm glad it doesn't mean anything anymore, so they can just be more of a relaxed fun atmosphere, because I think that's the spirit of all-star games.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you see Guerrero hitting the home run and Fernando Tatis Jr., with parting words as he passes shortstop. And, as you mentioned, you got the guys like Cedric Mullins, who are really good stories, having good first halves. What did you think about the microphones? Because this was the number one thing on my timeline, and they've done it in years past, but like this was the year where it was excessive. Like almost every inning, somebody was mic'd up. And I mean, I don't know who was thinking. I don't know what Fox was trying to get out of Liam Hendricks being mic'd up.
Yeah.
I don't know what they were. I mean, did they even think about the FCC, ramifications? I don't know what was going on there, but thank God they did, because it turned out to be great content. What did you think about the microphones and the players being mic'd up and that element to it?
Yeah, I really don't have a problem with it when it's an exhibition game like this. I'm not so excited to hear from Dave Roberts in the 8th inning of a ALCS game or anything like that, or even a Fox Saturday game of the week or whatever. I don't think there's that much gained from watching guys talk about the game while they're managing or playing the game. But with that said, the All-Star game is that perfect environment for it. And again, you're trying to foster an environment of more fun, unique content as far as drawing new fans and engaging younger fans. And so I think it's the right idea, as long as, again, too, it doesn't distract the players from, making all the plays. For instance, I think the one inning Tatis had to make a play at the end of the inning while mic'd up. And you couldn't tell he was even mic'd up. He made the play, didn't have to do much other than, I think, flip the ball to second base. So that I have no problem with. And these guys maintain their focus pretty well. So again, I really don't like it during meaningful games, and that's not so much of a thing as far as talking to players during meaningful games. But even the manager stuff is, I don't know, it doesn't do much for me.
And it actually worked out pretty well, because the I guess the numbers put the All-Star game ahead of the NBA All-Star game and the Pro Bowl. So that ended up being kind of a bright spot. Nelson Cruz and Taylor Rogers were there, and I know you do a lot of twin stuff. I mean, they were the two representatives. How much of, just kind of an overall picture on the Twins' first half, how much of a disappointment kind of has this season been for the people around the team and in the organization? Because I know, I mean, we were talking about, maybe not the same level of talent as maybe the White Sox have, but the White Sox have been hurt a lot, and the Twins just haven't been able to get a whole ton of things going. So what's kind of the disappointment level for them in the first half?
Oh, it's 100 out of 100. It's such a situation where you look at the Mets and you look at the White Sox and a few other teams who have managed to still play well in the face of injuries to their key core players. The White Sox, especially because it's the same division and it's the same players position-wise in a lot of ways. I mean, Byron Buxton and Luis Robert and Eloy Jimenez and all that. And it's just so unbelievable that those teams have been able to soldier on. Now, again, the big difference there is pitching. The Twins have not had any, and the Mets and the White Sox especially have had very good pitching. But there's just no reason for the Twins not to be hanging in that, plus or minus 3, 4, 5 games of 500 range, instead of opening the second half 11 games under 500. It doesn't add up. And so people are checking out pretty fast. I mean, Vikings training camp and all that's coming up pretty soon. And so there's going to be plenty of reason for fans to divert their attention elsewhere, unless the Twins really make a run here coming up soon. And they open the second half with the Tigers. It'll be 8 games in a row they played with the Tigers, 4 into the break, 4 out of the break, which is a really strange quirk. And then they've got a few against the White Sox. So they'll know what's what pretty quickly here out of the break if they have any chance of turning the season into even a respectable season, let alone fighting for any kind of playoff spot.
And I guess when teams start off this slow or, have a bad season, I mean, unfairly or fairly, the attention automatically goes to the manager and Rocco Baldelli in this case, who I admire. I think that he's been a pretty good manager for the Twins. I don't know what you think about him, but is his job safe, or are they not at that point yet?
No, he's safe. There's no question about that. And the big thing for him is he's their handpicked guy after they fired Paul Molitor. and he won games at a 60% clip for his first 2 seasons. So I don't see any way that they're thinking about anything other than this is a blip on the radar. Go get some pitching and take your chances again in 2022.
Yeah, no, I've never really. I mean, in some cases it works. I guess you want a culture change in your clubhouse and with the way things are run. But honestly, for a long time, I've been so down on managerial firings. I think they're very overrated. Anyhow, the deadline's coming up, and I know Minnesota has some interesting pieces. I don't know what the plan is with them, if they want to sell or not, but who can you possibly see on this team getting dealt?
Yeah, honestly, I really only see the guys who are going to be free agents at the end of the year most likely moving. Byron Buxton is going to be on the shelf through the deadline, or at least very close to it, and I think they want to take another run with him and Jose Berrios in 2022. Both are up for free agency after that. But other than that, I think Hansel Robles is going to be on the block. Alex Colomé, if someone is interested in taking him on, he's been okay since May 1st, nothing special, but someone might think they can turn him into, something closer to what he's been before. Andrelton Simmons is probably going to be flipped. He'll give someone a nice defensive boost down the stretch. He's given the Twins almost nothing offensively, though. And then the tough one is Nelson Cruz. Do the Twins want to move him? Does he want to go play somewhere where he'll have a chance at that ring that's eluded him now for a really long career? I mean, he came up in, I think, 2005 or 2006. So, I mean, he's been around a long time. He's played in the World Series with the Rangers, but never gotten there. Is he going to want to chase that, or is he going to be okay with sticking around and mentoring a lot of young players? And I think that they'll probably lean towards the trade option, because I think teams like Tampa Bay and even those same White Sox could be interested in his services down the stretch here.
Yeah, definitely interested to see where Nelson Cruz ends up. Back to Berrios here. I mean, he, if available, and I say that very, speculatively, if available, he would most definitely be the hottest commodity on the trade market when it comes to starting pitchers. Because right now you see a lot of the Danny Duffys and the Robbie Rays and the, Max Scherzer probably not going to be available. Maybe he is. I don't know. He would definitely be the most, controllable, young, good. I mean, what would it take for a team like the Dodgers or the Padres, who, LA just lost Clayton Kershaw. They've lost Dustin May. They've lost Trevor Bauer. And, the Padres have lost. They have no confidence, I don't think, in Dinelson Lamont's health. And, Darvish went on the shelf. Snell went on the shelf. What would it take for these teams, or maybe any other team, to maybe get a legitimate offer in for Berrios?
Yeah, it's going to be expensive, because the marketplace right now is flush with guys who are like number 4, number 5 starters, just kind of guys who can turn over your rotation. And even if you really like Danny Duffy, he's making quite a bit of money. He's a free agent at the end of the year, and it's pretty hard to buy into the fact that he's that much different than he's been the last few years. So all of those things kind of conspire against him to suggest he probably won't bring back a huge haul. In Berrios' favor, is he's young, he's under control through next year. He's not going to make a crazy amount of money through arbitration, no matter what happens. And he's good. He's really good. And there are going to be teams too that will see his pitch profile and all that and think, maybe we can be the team that turn him from a nice number 2 into a legit bona fide ace. And you're not going to want to pay for that, but in a lot of ways, the Twins can kind of extort that sort of value, because the teams that are going to be interested too are going to be flush with prospects. Especially Toronto comes to mind with Austin Martin and Jordan Grosshands, and probably not so much Alek Manoah now that he's in the big leagues, but Simeon Woods Richardson and Nate Pearson. They've got a lot of guys that check those boxes for what the Twins would probably be looking for in terms of high-end talent. And so what we've become accustomed to for trades for players with years of control or a year of control left, like the Francisco Lindor deal, which kind of underwhelmed all of us, I think that narrative is going to be blown up because of the fact that the scarcity of a pitcher like Berrios in this marketplace. So I think it's going to be very, very hard for the Twins to find a deal that's to their liking, unless the Dodgers really push their chips in and say, listen, Dustin May's hurt, but we'd be willing to trade him in return for Berrios, or something like where the Blue Jays say, yeah, our offense is set. We're not going to need Austin Martin and Jordan Grosshans. So we're going to borrow from that surplus to go get what we need in terms of pitching. It's a narrow band, and it's going to take, as I wrote a couple weeks ago, a perfect storm. But I think the Twins have to listen to what teams are willing to do.
Yeah, and say there's a situation where, they lock up Berrios and maybe even Byron Buxton too, and they go for it in these next few years. What would they need to do to kind of get back into playoff contention next season, or maybe the season after? What would they need to add to benefit the or is this downfall kind of a longer term process?
No, I don't think it is, because I think the fair portion of their core is still pretty young, and they have a lot of guys who are graduating as prospects in terms of Kirilloff, Larnach, hopefully eventually Royce Lewis and Johan Duran and a few other guys. So they're really going to have to iron out their rotation, because Michael Pineda is a free agent at the end of the year. They're going to obviously lose J-Happ. They don't care about that. But it's basically Kenta Maeda, who is in his 30s. Jose Berrios is a free agent at the end of next year. And then a bunch of young guys. You got Duran, Balazovic, and a bunch of other Blaine Enlow, who's on the shelf with Tommy John now. Basically, the Twins are a team that was hurt, especially by the canceled 2020 minor league season, in the sense that their pitching that was all likely going to develop to within the cusp of the big leagues or even into the big leagues all took a step backwards in terms of preparation. And so what they're going to have to do in terms of addressing their rotation next year is they're probably going to have to sign two guys and probably still identify a sleeper type that they like to, whether it's a John Gray or an Eduardo Rodriguez, or that kind of pitcher where you're not going to have to pay 100% market value for what they can become. Kind of what I had hoped the Twins could have done with Kevin Gausman this offseason before he accepted the QO. So they've got a lot of questions. I think you sign Berrios. I think you keep Maeda, and that's your top two. And then you probably want to bring Pineda back. You can kind of hope on someone like Duran, Balazovic, Randy Dobnak to fill out one of those spots. And then, you got to hit on some kind of guy that needs to bounce back, whether it's a guy who's lost his way or a guy who had some pedigree and has not figured out the pitch mix or consistency, something like that. So they're going to have to get creative. They've wanted to make a trade for a really good starter for quite a while. And I know one of those guys was Zach Gallen back in the day, and it just didn't work out. So they're obviously open-minded to a lot of things, but it's going to start with starting pitching. The bullpen they're going to have to fix up too, but they're going to be a lot different with that. They love going and getting kind of the guys who are off the beaten path. Like Luke Farrell was really pitching well for them, and Derek Law has looked better of late. They're not so much tied up in the big money relievers. They're going to have to really make improvements with their rotation, and then that alone will allow the bullpen to kind of let the sea level rise, because they won't throw so many innings.
Yeah, and I just a side note here, I cover the Giants for twice a homestand freelance, and the talk around them is how the pitching staff is everybody's leaving after this year. Everybody's pretty much a free agent after this season. Gosman and DeSclafani and Wood, and maybe the Twins could go after one of them. Also Derek Law, former Giant. So nice name drop there. Let's look at the full picture here, kind of around the league. I know the All-Star break is over, and this is where MLB is marketed as to giving the label, okay, it's a foot race now. Like that's what we are now at this point, and even more so after the deadline. So what are kind of some of the storylines? What are some of the things that you'll be looking forward to in the second half as far as the entire league goes? Anything stick out to you?
Well, I'm always curious how fast starters will keep up and if slow starters will turn things around. Seattle is a team that comes to mind. I mean, they're 5 games over 500, but I don't know if they even believe they're that good yet. I know Jared Kelenic is coming up after the break here, and they're going to see what they have. Hopefully he hits the ground running a little better this time around than last time, but obviously the talent is there. I'm curious to see how San Francisco does too. I mean, can they hold off not only the Dodgers, but the Padres, both teams who are forecasted to do big things. And instead, the Giants have kind of done what they do. They've gotten some pitching. They've had a few guys pop up and play better than had been expected. I think LaMonte Wade Jr. is one of those guys. Shout to Lamont, one of my guys from the Twins days. Absolutely terrific guy. And if you get a chance to talk to him, you'll have to let him know that I sent you. But I am really excited to see if Milwaukee can hang on. Cincinnati's playing well. Can the Braves get back into it? I still think the Braves, even without Acuna, are a solid team. And so honestly, it's I'm mostly looking at team stuff. Player stuff it can change so fast. So for me, it's all about who's trending in what direction at this point of the year.
LaMonte Wade Jr., I will tell him that you sent me. But no, LaMonte Wade Jr., let's touch on him for a second, because he's been quite the revelation, and they made this move. And at the time, the Giants really didn't have a set bullpen, and Sean Anderson, was a guy that looked to be possibly like a future setup guy. His stuff was kind of flat the last season he pitched, and LaMonte Wade Jr. was, a guy that was added into a mix of outfielders with Alex Dickerson and Austin Slater and all these other guys, and there really wasn't room for him. And then he comes up and wasn't a huge power guy, but I think the thing that Farhan Zaidi liked about him was, if you look at the minor league stats, he had more walks than hits, and that's been his tool. And now all of a sudden he's hitting for power, and he's doing really well for this team. And when Brandon Belt went down, he started playing some first base, a position he's never played regularly before. So, I mean, was this foreseen when he was a Minnesota Twin? Was there always kind of something to unlock there with LaMonte Wade Jr.?
The discipline was always there. It was just a matter of if he was going to drive the baseball. And, we look at where we're at this point in terms of plate appearances and sample size and all that. And maybe it's not going to stick, but you can't take away what's already happened. I think that's the thing we forget about when we try to assume players are going to correct their course is, yeah, he might not be hitting at his true talent level, but that's all going to be lifted up by the fact that he started off so hot. And a lot of Twins fans have lamented that the Twins could use him with Buxton hurt and Kepler dealt with some injuries, and they don't have Eddie Rosario anymore. But Rob Refsnyder stepped in and played well before he got hurt. Kyle Garlick was kind of playing his role too. And Jake Cave literally had a broken back, went on the 60-day IL. So it would have taken a whole lot for LaMonte Wade to get a fair crack here. And it was pretty obvious to see that the Twins, again, had to make something happen in the bullpen. The more lamentable thing was that Anderson hit waivers and was claimed by the Rangers. And so the Twins had nothing to show for that. And, I think actually the Rangers probably sent him through waivers again a couple days later. So it is what it is. There's nothing much you can do about the past. And the trade made sense at the time. But boy, Wade has really figured things out for the Giants. And it's good to see.
Yeah, I think Sean Anderson is now a Oriole, which is kind of interesting. And I know there was an incident with him where he had a fastball up and in that came in on Mike Trout or something, and Joe Madden yelled at him, and it was pretty funny. But LaMonte Wade Jr. in his career, here's an interesting note: no hits against left-handed pitching in his career. So that's
I didn't know that. I'm a big LaMonte Wade guy. I like LaMonte Wade Jr. and I think he's a great dude. Wow, 0 hits again. Have you tweeted that? I'm gonna have to see if you've tweeted that and retweet it, because that's crazy.
Yeah, I tweeted it during one of the games. I mean, it was it's a small sample size, and the way Gabe Kapler has, if you're on the roster, you're gonna play. I mean, that's just kind of how Gabe Kapler uses his bench. I mean, it's a bench that comes in. I mean, you'd expect most National League benches to come in and pinch hit 4 in the 7th and double switch this. But when there's a scoring opportunity and there's a chance to pinch hit for Alex Dickerson or something, Austin Slater's being used. So they're really short to the punch with guys with the bat, of course, with the splits. So LaMonte Wade, not a hit against left-handed pitching in his major league career. So definitely crazy. And it's just a testament of I think of it now as the Jock Peterson syndrome, because in LA they never let him play against lefties, and then when he signed with the Cubs, the big hoopla around it was that he's going to get to play every day. And
is that a good thing or a bad thing? Honestly,
I don't think it's, I don't know. Jock, I guess it's not a good thing because I mean, now we're seeing why.
Mhm.
But I'm going to bounce around here because I do a lot of, just random stuff here on this show. I want to go back to Ohtani here because I know the comparisons of Babe Ruth are pretty valid. I know, I think Ohtani literally did everything possible at the All-Star game, hit home runs in the Derby, got the win, pitched an inning, 500-foot home run, everything. Kind of
Mhm.
did that in the first half too. But describe how good this guy is and what you've seen from him. Because I feel like as a baseball community, we're not taking in enough of what this guy's doing.
Yeah, I mean it's incredible what he's doing offensively. I mean, he's one of the very best pure hitters, 33 home runs. Even just looking at that still floors me. 33 home runs. I thought he'd pitch. I really did. I thought he'd be a great pitcher, and I thought the hitting, when I first watched his swing, I thought it looked a little long, and so maybe he'd struggle with velocity, especially up. But boy, he has calmed those worries and then some. And on the mound, he's been solid as well. He's not exactly been as good as you'd want for somebody who's starting the All-Star game on the mound. But at the same time, I mean, man, the total package, it's Babe Ruth in his early portion of his career, and he's really been impressive.
And Joe Buck pointed this out during the All-Star game, and it was a great point. Babe Ruth only did it like 2 years, full time, 2 years.
Right.
So I mean, basically what he's doing is what we've never seen before. I mean, I know somebody wrote an article about this. It's been done in the Negro Leagues prior. So
Mhm.
maybe those guys are his best comparison. But do you see like maybe him picking one or the other down the road? I mean, nobody wants to think about that now because it's awesome what he's doing. But is there a chance that he could pick one or the other?
I kind of thought he'd probably end up picking pitching just because of the value in pitching compared to, how the rest of the game kind of seems to value offense. But he's just been so good offensively that it's hard for me to see him scrapping that. And the Angels need pitching so badly. They've had such issues with keeping guys' elbows healthy, especially, that I just can't see it right now. And again, he's in his age 26 season, and he just turned 27 a few days ago. I don't know, man. I think you just got to keep riding the wave, and if he doesn't stay healthy, it is what it is. You got to let the human body kind of handle things as it does. They still have him under pretty cheap club control for like 3 more years, so I think they'll just get what they can out of him and hope for the best.
And this is the perfect year because I don't think the Angels are really doing anything, but this is the perfect year to figure out his schedule. I know in the past it's like, okay, pitch once a week. How are we going to work him in as a DH? And I think down the road we might even see some outfield work for Shohei Ohtani. And I mean, I saw something about, oh, maybe he could be a closer, but that would be problematic because what if the game's on the line in the ninth inning and he's due up third and
Yeah.
should be warming up? So it's like it's kind of a really tricky spot, but definitely I think they're getting his schedule cemented and what they want to do long term.
Mhm.
Let's bring up your podcast because I know you got something going on here coming out. Do you want to kind of describe what it is?
So I don't know. I was kicking around an idea of a nostalgia based podcast because I listened to this wrestling podcast called 83 Weeks that is largely nostalgia based around wrestling. And so that show's blown up. And I thought, well, why can't we do something like that about baseball? And so, I grew up watching 1990s baseball, and I thought, what better way to capitalize on that than to find someone who played in that era and compare my notes of what I thought I saw and what I thought I experienced from what he actually went through. And so it was a matter of finding the right player. And I asked Paul Molitor because I covered him as a manager with the Twins, and he thought it was a good idea, but he just couldn't commit to the time. And so then I moved on to Greg Olson, who was a reliever for a bunch of different teams from the late 80s to the early 2000s. probably the most famous thing he ever did related to the Giants was walk intentionally Barry Bonds with the bases loaded. So he played for Bobby Cox. He played for Buck Showalter. He played for Frank Robinson. All kinds of, I think Davey Johnson was another one. He played for some really well-known managers. He did some broadcasting, so he's not going to be a fish out of water in terms of talking about things. He was a Team USA guy. He was drafted like 4th overall out of Auburn. He just checks a lot of the boxes for what we're going to want to get from a guy remembering the 90s. And since he played in both leagues, he would have faced, like I said, Barry Bonds and Ken Griffey Jr. and Kirby Puckett and all these different guys that I'm going to want to ask him about. And then I think what we're going to do is a little bit of a meet and greet podcast next week, just kind of get to know him, get to know me, anybody who's never listened to any of my shows. And then the MLB strike from 1994 is going to be one of our first episodes because we're coming up on the anniversary of that. In fact, we're about a month away from the 27th anniversary. And then we'll talk about like replacement players and labor strife and what that was like, canceling of the World Series, what it meant to the Expos to obviously have that team kind of blown up after that with Pedro Martinez and Larry Walker and all that. So we got a lot of meat and a lot of meat on the bone as far as content. So it's exciting to get started, and I'm hopeful it'll take off because there's a lot of people who've expressed curiosity and interest in it.
Awesome. That's great. What kind of piqued your interest when it came to 1990s baseball? Because you're going to hate me for this, but I was born in 2002. So
surprised. I'm not surprised.
Little 19 years old, little past 1990s baseball. But man, looking back at and I love baseball history. So I go back. I actually just read a book. I got it right here. It's called The Game. And it actually talks about the 94 strike and Bud Selig and George Steinbrenner and all those characters. I
probably have that on my bookshelf here somewhere. I'm not seeing it at this second, but I got a lot of stuff on my bookshelf. Anyhow,
yeah.
Yeah.
How did you kind of? Because I mean, I look back at that era and I go, "Wow, that must have been a fun era." I mean, steroids aside, just for a second, which was fun, by the way. Ken Griffey Jr. with the backwards hat, and if you really look at it, the 90s was the real origin. It was a small origin of what we're seeing now with the whole let the kids play type thing. And it was just a really cool era looking back from my point of view. What kind of, I mean, you lived through it. What did you like most about it?
Well, I was 8 in 1993 when I started watching, and 93 was kind of the end of the early portion of that decade where, like, if you hit 20 homers, you were having a really good year. And then we hit like 94 and Griffey started blowing up and Matt Williams and all these guys started blowing up. Obviously Bonds and I think Juan Gonzalez hit like 46 homers each in 93, but it wasn't a power centric game like it became and now it is. But I think you always remember the game as you were brought up on it. And so even though I have a strong appreciation for the sabermetric concepts and analytical concepts that rule the game today, I have a strong enjoyment and appreciation for how I learned the game before I read the book of Moneyball when I was your age, So I have a fond memory of watching Metrodome era Twins teams that would lose 95 games every year. So for me, it's just going to be going back to my comfort zone. And that way, it's not going to be that hard to prepare. I'm going to have to learn more about the strike in terms of what it actually meant, because when I was 8 years old, the strike just meant there wasn't going to be a World Series or a last few months of the season. And so for me, that meant a premature end to Kent Herbeck's career. It didn't mean the players are holding out for the money that they think they deserve or they want more concessions in the CBA in terms of rights and that sort of thing. So it's going to be kind of a mix of blending the concepts that I didn't really know as a kid to what I do know now as an adult, and then running it by a guy who lived it. I think that's just going to be the perfect mix of a lot of different things that's going to give us content for years.
Absolutely. Sounds like a great mix, and can't wait to listen to it. And a few more things before we wrap up here, but I woke up this morning and I looked at Twitter as I always do. And I mean, you got into a little scuffle with some people about Pete Rose and
Yikes.
Whether I guess he should be forgiven, reinstated, et cetera, whatever you want to call it. I mean, what is your argument against that happening? Because I kind of feel the same way. I feel, and my main thing is that I really don't think that he's fixed anything at all. I think he's just living the exact same way he lives. I still think he bets on sports. He said it the last time. I mean, the commissioner asked him straight up last time he tried to get reinstated and he was denied. Are you still betting on baseball? And he said, yeah. And it really screwed him. He even admitted, he's like, oh God, I probably shouldn't have said that. So I don't think he's changed at all. He's got some other weird things against him that, possibly criminal at the time. I mean, there's a lot of things that Pete Rose did wrong. And I understand the argument that all of his stuff is in the Hall of Fame and, but it's also a museum. It's not necessarily a fraternity like all these guys. Well, it is for them, but you get my point. But what is kind of your argument against Rose being in the in Cooperstown or even being hailed upon, I guess?
I mean, gambling is the kind of cardinal sin in professional sports and baseball, especially. He used it in a way that affected other people's livelihoods. Mario Soto comes to mind, but possibly even Cal Daniels and Eric Davis in terms of how they were used and not used and all that sort of thing. And honestly, I mean, he chose to accept the punishment as opposed to continue to fight it. He was dishonest about it for a very long time instead of just taking his punishment out of the chute. And then, there's the talk of him being, having relationships with underage girls. I mean, it's a confluence of messy spots, messy situations that to me just make me feel confident that he doesn't need to be in the Hall of Fame. He's acknowledged as the hit king. He's acknowledged as a big part of the Big Red Machine. He's acknowledged as a lot of things, but I don't think he has to be enshrined as a human being if he doesn't meet the character clause that the BBWA has put forward. Now, again, I hear the argument. There's a lot of nasty dudes in the Hall of Fame already, and do you really want to throw them out? Honestly, I don't have a problem with it if you want to start picking guys out and throwing them out, but you also have to adjust for the context of the time. I mean, Cap Anson was racist, but he was also pretty much just like anybody else back then. America is a messed up place that has evolved a lot and still has more evolving to do. So it's a dicey issue. It's a tough decision, but if that's the route people want to go, I really don't have a problem with it. You can throw Roberto Alomar out of the Hall of Fame for all I care. You can throw any number of guys out. It's just a matter of two wrongs don't make a right. You can't just tell me, hey, this bad guy's in the Hall of Fame, so why can't Pete Rose be? If I can make one right decision rather than two wrong decisions, I'm going to do it every time.
100%. And speaking of the Hall of Fame, and this is an awful segue to go from one guy to a complete opposite of that guy. Do you think Joe Mauer gets in? Because I know that's such a bad segue from Pete Rose to Joe Mauer.
All good.
Do you think Joe Mauer gets in? Because I'm flooded with Buster Posey and his resurgence and the talk about that. But Joe Mauer right now is probably the closest catcher to getting in the Hall of Fame that is not in, and that will appear on a ballot coming up here shortly. Because I mean, his definitely the numbers are up there. He had a really good prime, and I know a lot of people are going to say, well, he didn't put up some of the stuff at, he did a lot at first base, which is true, but he also did a lot at catcher. A one-team guy, and for me, the one-team guys really stick out because, I mean, there's not a lot of them, and it just makes your case stronger in a weird way. Like, I think it really hurt Fred McGriff that he was identified with like a million different teams unfairly, but it's kind of the reality. Gary Sheffield, I think it hurt a lot. I think he should definitely be getting more consideration instead of being like in the kind of the Sammy Sosa vote total area. But what do you think about Joe Mauer and his Hall of Fame case here?
Yeah, it's actually funny. I had a mailbag a couple of weeks ago where I addressed Posey versus Mauer, and I said put them both in because Mauer actually only caught at that point, I think he was 100 and some games behind Posey in terms of career games caught. And in a way, Posey's resurgence now is what Mauer never was able to do. So I'm putting Posey in, obviously, even if he hadn't had this resurgence. I just think the company catchers keep, there's some alliteration there. The company catchers keep is just so minimal in terms of high end talent. I don't think, if I'm not mistaken, Johnny Bench, I don't even think has 100 career Fangraphs WAR, where a lot of positions have guys 150 and above. So when you account for other players around them and what they accomplished, yeah, Bench was 74.8. I think Mauer's in the 50s, and I think Buster's in the high 50s. So it's just a matter of how do they compare to their contemporaries. And for me, both of those guys are right there. And there's really no doubt in my mind. I mean, you look at transcendent catchers over the last 25 or 30 years, and it's those two guys, depending on how you view Russell Martin, Brian McCann, and, other than that, it's mashers like Mike Piazza. So for me, it's an obvious yes as far as putting Mauer and Posey into the Hall of Fame. I have no problem with it at all.
Yeah, and I was thinking about doing like a top 10 at each position in a series like that or something. But, looking down those lists, I mean, Victor Martinez even finds his way on there. I know he DH'd a lot of it, but I mean, you'll end up in some weird wormholes if you go down at some of the active players and go, wow, that guy's having a good career, or, has had a good career. Like Zach Greinke. I mean, I think he's got more Baseball Reference WAR or it's close between him and Clayton Kershaw, which is wild, and him and Justin Verlander, which is wild. So, I mean, definitely there's a lot of players that we reflect back on and go, wow, that guy might be a Hall of Famer or might be a borderline Hall of Famer. But for me, I think you're either in or you're not. Enough with he's not going to get in first ballot. Before we go, ballots. Yeah, exactly. Before we go, I want to get your thoughts real quick here on some of these rules that have been implemented the past few years. I know the runner on second base to start extra innings is the biggest one. What do you think about that?
I'd rather see it. It's growing on me in the sense that I don't hate that it could be used at some point, but I don't like it being used in the 10th inning. I want it to be the 11th or the 12th. Give me a couple regular innings before we go to the shootout, like in hockey. In hockey too, there was it 3-on-3 and then the shootout. So honestly, give me regular baseball for 2 more innings, and then we can do the Mickey Mouse finish. It's fine with me. But I'm not saying I want to romanticize being there at the park till 1 a.m. at a 22 inning game. It's kind of cool every now and then, but I'm fine with in the 12th inning. Let's speed this thing up.
What about the 7 inning doubleheaders?
Hate it. I thought I would hate it, and I don't like it. It's just I don't know. It's not baseball. I know you got to protect pitching and all that, but that's what the 27th man is supposed to do. Bring up a guy from AAA who can make a start for you. I think the Twins are doing that Friday with Charlie Barnes, who's going to make his big league debut, a lefty from Clemson. And so, I think that's what the 27th man is for, is for added protection. I would rather you add an extra 2 players, a starter and a reliever, than shorten games by multiple innings, because it's just not the spirit of how baseball should be played.
That would be wild if a pitcher goes into an arbitration case like Madison Bumgarner and says, hey, I threw a shutout this year. That should count for something. And then the arbitrator goes, yeah, it was a 7 inning. It was a 7 inning game. That'd be wild. And last but not least, I'm iffy on this, but I still don't have an opinion on the shift. I think I see both sides of it. I see the crowd that says defenses should be aligned however they want to be aligned. Like Bill Belichick, could put his defenders wherever he wants, and the batter should learn to hit the ball the other way. But that is an interesting point, and I think the people against, are for banning the shift would say, well, we've said that for so many years now, but it's not happening. And guys, instead of trying to hit the ball through the shift, they've now resorted to hitting the ball over the shift. And that's why there's more strikeouts. That's why there's more home runs. And, that's what's happening now. So what do you think about the shift? Because I could go either way on it.
I guess what I'm curious is how much data we need to have to know when players have decided to no longer hit against it. You know what I mean? As far as, could there be a pendulum swing here in the next 3 to 5 years where hitters continue to trend, new guys coming up who might be in AAA or now or are rookies alter their swings and the landscape of the league changes drastically? Like, have we given it enough time to the point where we can be certain that they will never ever make that adjustment? And I look at the landscape of the game and I can see why people would say yes, but at the same time too, change does not happen overnight in baseball, and there are going to be guys whose careers depend on it. I mean, I think if a guy goes 5 years and he never ever learns to hit against a shift and hits 220 with limited power, doesn't it? You know, at that point, and he's out of the big leagues, he's going to do whatever it takes to stick around with his second chance. And there's going to be guys who see their games out of his mold that will say, listen, this is what I need to do differently coming up to stick in the big leagues. So I think the evolution of the game still has to play out, if that makes sense. You still have to let this kind of go to the point where, you know, if we're seeing home runs and strikeouts continue to rise 5 years from now, then it's more of an issue. Like the next CBA. This CBA, leave it as it is. I still think you need more time to let the data kind of shake out. And I'm not a data scientist. I'm not a real smart math guy. So that probably already disproves my point in terms of the smart people at MLB knowing the data. But I need more time to see what players are going to do adjustment wise over the next 3 to 5 seasons.
Yeah, when I think of the shift, I think of 2 careers ending. Ryan Howard, I think we'd be talking about him much more differently, and definitely Jay Bruce too. So 2 guys that, you know, arguably had their careers ended by the shift. And the funniest thing about the shift is that I would go to games and I'd watch Evan Longoria play on the right of second base and Brandon Crawford have that left side, and nobody's in the vicinity of third base, and Johnny Cueto's throwing fastballs away. And I'm just like, what's going on here? Like, nobody's on the same page. I don't know how much that happens, but definitely interesting considering your defense is doing the complete opposite of how you're attacking the hitter, which is great. Brandon, I appreciate the time. This was a lot of fun. And thanks for joining me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Anytime. You just let me know.
Absolutely. You guys could follow Brandon on Twitter. His handle is @Brandon_Warne, WARNE. Again, he covers the Twins for Access Twins. And again, that podcast is coming out soon. Do you want to, what's the name of it again?
That 90s Baseball Pod. And if people were already subscribed to Midwest Swing, my previous baseball podcast, everything's going to transition over and it's going to be all a smooth transition. So if people are already subscribed, just sit tight. We'll have some big things coming here in the next week or so.
Go check that out. I will also subscribe. I should have been subscribed already, but I will go check it out as well.
Hey, better late than never.
Better late than never. All right. And of course, you guys can follow us on Twitter and Instagram @RizzoCast. You can follow me on Twitter @Steven Risotto, RISSOTTO. Thank you guys for listening and have a great day.